Good morning, everyone. We are Joseph and Anita from the Archdiocesan Family Life Commission, and we also belong to the parish of the Assumption in Petaling Jaya. We are here this morning to present chapter 5 of the Amoris Laetitia, and it's called Love Made Fruitful. We hope that you will have a very blessed and enriching time.
So, this is chapter 5 of Amoris Laetitia, and it's called Love Made Fruitful. So, now fruitfulness is the focus of this 5th chapter of Pope Francis on love in the family. Amoris Laetitia. Pope Francis outlines how much love overflows from the couple to the family, which they co create together with God. The love of husband and wife not only inhabits the nuclear family, but also to their extended family. The love that originates in the family spreads to unify the whole human family and bind us together as brothers and sisters.
So, dear brothers and sisters, love is life giving. Divine love gives life. Human love gives life. Love, once again, is life giving. So, in the family, we see this life giving most concretely in the birth of our children, born of our parents' love. In this way, married love mirrors the love of God, whose love is at the origin of everything that exists. The father and mother participate in the ongoing creative work of God by being his instruments in the bringing forth a child that at once his and theirs.
So, the son or daughter of the parents is a reflection of their love and is to be welcomed as a gift from God. As the life giving love between spouses mirrors the love of God, so too does parents' love for their children. Like God's love, it is a love that first loves us. Parents love their children even before they arrive. Children are loved before having done anything to deserve it. They are loved just because they are. Though it is often difficult to realize, it is the same with God's love for each of us.
Now, no child must feel worthless or abandoned. So take a look at these pictures here. It's very, very sorry and very it's heart wrenching to see children suffer like this. So our Holy Father contrasts his his uh, his great gracious love of parents for their children with the stark reality of what happens in the world today. That is, like these children who are rejected, who are abandoned, and robbed of their childhood and their future. Now, this is a real and a very sad situation of too many children across the world. In the words of our Holy Father, this is shameful. Indeed, when speaking of children who come into the world, no sacrifice made by adults will be considered too costly or too great. They are children. If it means the children has to feel that they are a mistake. Can you imagine if the child comes out feeling that they are a mistake, or worthless, or abandoned to the arrogance of man? Can you imagine what an impact that will have on an innocent child being brought into the world?
Now, while large families are a joy for the church, there must also be responsible parenthood. Parents have an inviolable liberty to make wise and responsible decisions for themselves and the family. Every mother shares in the mystery of creation, renewed with each birth. Every child growing within the mother's womb is part of the eternal plan of God, the Father. Each child has a place in God's heart from all eternity. The world sees the embryo as just a blob, but we need to see with the eyes of God, who always looks beyond mere appearances. When we do all we will see the great value of the embryo from the moment of conception. You know that term, just a blob, it's such an insult to the creation of God, isn't it? All of us began from that little embryo. And if you say it's just a blob, where does that leave you and I as people, as human beings? So that's something to really think about and reflect on.
And if I may add, we also know that we are taught, the church teaches us that life begins at conception. So that's already human life there, not a blob. So children are a gift from God and they are a reward from Him. And this is from Psalms. So in a world where scientific advances allow us to show the color of a child's hair, now they come out with little videos and CDs, and even potential illnesses that the child may have after birth, that's the gender of the child, the sex of the child, how important it is for the child to feel wanted and to be received as a gift. We love our children because they are children, not because they are beautiful or they look or think as we do or they embody our dreams, but we love them because they are a gift to each one of us from God. They are unique and irreplaceable. So the love of parents is the means by which God, our Father, shows His own love. So when we procreate children, it is God's love being shown. He awaits the birth of each child, accepts that child unconditionally, and welcomes him or her freely.
Our Holy Father urges all future mothers to keep happy and not to let anything come in the way of the joys of motherhood. Do not let fear or worry or other people's comments lessen your joy at being God's means of bringing a new life into the world. Join in Mary's song of joy and say, "My soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord, and my spirit exults in God my Savior." So our Holy Father urges all mothers to be joyful, to preserve and to preserve that joy and pass it on to our child.
So, dear brothers and sisters, while we know that a mother's love is very important for a child, there is also the father's love, the father's care. So we actually work as a team. Fathers and mothers both cooperate with the love of God, who is the creator, and they are entrusted with the work of doing the paternal and maternal face of the Lord. They're interpreting the paternal and maternal face of the Lord. But who else but a mom and a dad can do this? As parents, we are an integral part of the child's growth. Together, as parents, they teach the way of God's love, which is the value of reciprocity. Now, what is reciprocity? Means treating others with dignity and respect for differences, of being able to give and take. Now, this is a very important statement. It is found on 172 from the Amoris Laetitia. The importance of reciprocity, of treating others with dignity and respect for differences, and being able to give and take.
Children deserve the love of both their mother and father. And they need to see that this love that is there between their parents, between their mother and father. Fathers and mothers have different, though flexible, roles in the family, and both are necessary for the healthy growth of the child. For a well adjusted growth in a child, the love, tenderness, and the faith of mothers and the gifts of fathers' masculinity are needed in the family. In other words, the parents' love bears fruit in the life that they give to their children, but also in the love that children receive from their parents for their entire lives. This is true even when the parents are not genetically related to their children. So this means that even if you have adopted children, all right, they still receive the love and care that any parent gives their child.
So, talking about adopted children, some couples are unable to have children. Now, this is a reality, and we know that this can be a real source of suffering for them. It's a great concern for them too. And in these cases, marriage still retains its character of being a whole relationship and a communion of life. And they are still called to love in a life-giving way. So even if for circumstances where the couple is unable to have children of their own, and they go out and adopt a child, they are expected to fulfill all the roles of a parent as if the children were their biological children. So too, parenthood is not always a biological reality, but it can be expressed in diverse ways. So we talk about adoption or foster care when the couple cannot have their own children. Adoption is a very generous way to become parents. And this doesn't just end with infertility. Yeah? Sometimes we can also be good people, good responsible people by volunteering for various organizations that reach out to the needy, the elderly, and the sick. There's a great need for this, especially nowadays. So, working for the poor and the marginalized, taking up the cause for peace and justice. These are just examples of where we can be in a form of parenthood, not being biological parents or adoptive parents, but parents to the people who need our help, our care, and concern.
This is the life-giving aspect of couples, yeah, to be life-giving to everybody in the community.
And to be fruitful.
So the fruitfulness of love not only radiates throughout society, it also warms and illuminates the church. The family is fertile ground in which the seeds of faith can be sown and bear fruit from generation to generation. In this way, the family is, as the Second Vatican Council noted, the family is a domestic church. Families are beacons that radiate the light of Christ's love to their friends, their neighbors, and to society at large. Families are little communities of evangelization because they are the places where the good news can be lived and spread to the world. By their witness, as well as their words, families speak to others of Jesus. They pass on the faith, they arouse a desire for God, and they reflect the beauty of the gospel and its way of life.
So, dear brothers and sisters, family is everything. Our world is a family. Without family, the basis of human life is gone. So, the exhortation discusses life. This exhortation means this chapter 5, discusses life in the wider family. Now, here we are told that the nuclear family is a father, mother, and the children, needs to interact with the wider family, which is made up of, we can talk about parents, uh, uncles, aunts, cousins, and even neighbors. So we are told that we don't remain as a cell, as a nuclear family, but we reach out to our extended family, as what we call them, uncles, aunts, cousins, and even neighbors. Now, I think all of us do that at some point or another, especially at festivals, like for Chinese New Year, during, we have the reunion dinners, and it's really very, very good. But does it stop there? Since we are all sons and daughters, even when we are parents, we need to respect our parents at every stage of life and learn from the years of wisdom they have accumulated. So, this is what this chapter is trying to stress too, that we don't just become parents and then we forget about what our parents have taught us. They have put us where we are, and we have to always give due respect to what they have taught us. A family that fails to respect and cherish its grandparents, who are its living memory, is already in decline, whereas a family that remembers has a future. And it's also biblical. Remember the Ten Commandments. The first three takes care of God. Everything, importance is given to God. But what does the fourth commandment say? Honor thy father and mother. And then again in scripture, we also find that a person who honors his father and looks after him in his old age will be truly blessed. So it's biblical. It's God telling us. And we too, our Holy Father also and emphasizes on this, on our older generation, those who have gone before us. And we won't be here if it wasn't for them.
So it's very often that the grandparents are the ones who ensure that the most important values are passed down to their grandchildren. And many people can testify that they owe their initiation into the Christian life to their grandparents. For instance, learning to pray, learning to be polite, and to mind our manners are just some of the invaluable lessons that we learn. The church challenges us to not conform to the norms of our throwaway society. Our throwaway society, when something is old, we think it's not useful anymore, it's thrown away. But no, our Holy Father challenges us to not conform to that, because old is gold, we say. And we do not subscribe to attitudes of impatience or indifference or contempt towards old age. In fact, we cherish, we acknowledge, we respect, and we support all.
If I may also add, from what I learned from my grandparents when I was growing up, I was very fortunate to be staying with my grandparents for a while in my early formative years in Ipoh, and I must acknowledge the fact that I learned a lot from them. I learned how to say my prayers. I learned how to sit down and meet for dinner. We were told to go to church for daily mass, and these are things that have been inbuilt in me, and these were passed down to me by my grandparents from my mother's side as well as from my father's side. This is something that I will never forget, because it is already etched in our memory and as a legacy. So once again, children are a living reflection and permanent sign of the love between man and woman. So we mentioned this earlier. Yet, the fruitfulness of a family's love can also be experienced in many ways. So, going back to our parents again, caring for our parents, reaching out to members of the extended family, ex- embracing those in need, contributing to the good of the local community and the wider society are all means by which the love experienced in the family flows outward to humanize the world and create human bonds between men and women of our day. So, dear brothers and sisters, what we're saying is it all begins with the family. If we come from a family where there is love, the husband and wife love each other, they love the children love them back, then we are physically and mentally and emotionally prepared to go out and look after the rest of society as and when required. We are in a position to do that. But if the family is in disarray, the chances of us reaching out to other people may be different. Why? Because we are already hurting, we are already having formed certain negative concepts about people and family and relationships. So, very important, it starts with the family. So, Pope Francis aptly observes that the family introduces fraternity. Fraternity means friendship, fellowship to the world. And from this initial experience of fraternity, we're using the word fraternity because we've taken it directly from Amoris Laetitia, nourished by affection and education at home, the style of fraternity radiates like a promise upon the whole of society.
Memory is necessary for growth. We are told that historical memory, which is knowing and judging past events, is the only way to build a meaningful future. When the elderly tell their stories, it is good for children to listen because it gives them a sense of being connected to the living history of their families, a strong sense of belonging. We are urged to make our families places where children can sink roots in the rich soil of a collective history. I can remember my father-in-law, telling us of how he grew up and how he lived his life, and I remember my elder daughter listening so intently to him, and I'm very grateful to him for having passed on that sense of history to our children.
So the value of sibling relationships. Now, this is something that we will experience in our families. When we are children, we are siblings. Then we later, as we grow up, we also experience other areas. So in a family, we learn how to live as one, and relationships between siblings deepen with the passing of time. So when we are young, we have a different kind of relationship. When we grow older, it's different. So every person in a family is different. I think when we sit back and look back at our families, we know that we are all different. No two children will exactly be alike in looks, behavior, mannerisms, etc., unless they are identical twins, and even then, it's not always the same. Okay, identical twins are, they are rare, and they are an exception to the rule. But if you take a family of, say, 3 or 4 children, every child has its own character. So learning to accept differences and appreciating one another's gifts and talents make the family a great school for the whole of society. Now, we are talking about families where we have 3 or 4 children. Families like probably where people like Anita and I came from, of the older school. However, the generation today is slightly different.
So, the other important aspect of growing up with brothers and sisters is the beautiful experience of caring for, and helping one another. Children need to be taught to share, to interact patiently and with kindness, to treat each other kindly. In some countries where it has become quite common to have only one child, the experience of being a brother or a sister is lost. And along with it, so many other values and habits are also lost. Society badly needs this attitude of being able to care for one another. When we can see a stranger as someone's daughter or sister, someone's mother or aunt, we will tend to be more thoughtful and considerate.
So we are reminded that in addition to the small circle of father, mother, and their children, there is a larger family. So this is a very important thing that we have to take note of. Relatives and members of a household, friends and neighbors make up the larger family of the community, which needs our care and support at all times, and also from time to time. So what we need to do here is, we cannot isolate ourselves as families. Being ourselves, the nuclear family, we stick to ourselves, we don't interact with anyone. But we need to be generous with our time, our commitment to support and reach out to others in the community. They are also our family.
So, this is not only a theological ideal, but it is an urgent call, an opportunity to respond to the real needs of our time. Aiding teenage mothers, assisting refugees, visiting the aging, helping young people who suffer from addictions, giving affection to the handicapped persons, and reaching out to those afflicted by loss and separation. This is a very real situation existing in our world today. And as families, as father and mother, as parents, it is our duty, our call to be the light, to be the beacon, to help this world that is ailing and suffering.
So, dear brothers and sisters, so thus the fertile love of man and woman bears fruit in the children they bear, in the family members for whom they care, in those in need to whom they reach out, in the human family as a whole, and in the life of the families in the church. The love in families bear fruit It humanizes, it educates, it spread goodness and warmth. The love in families gives a home where faith can be learned and lived. The love in families is God's instrument for the life of each person and the life of the world. Thank you very much, dear brothers and sisters. We hope you had an enriching time. God bless.
So, good morning, brothers and sisters in Christ. We are Andrew and Andrene. We have been married for 57 years, 4 children, and 7 grandchildren. So, we are in a way graduated from the school of hard knocks, so to speak. Okay. Our involvement in the Family Life Commission is to look after the grandparents and the elderly in our archdiocese. It's a new formed ministry, and we have been tasked to look after it. Okay. All right. So today we are going to follow up from Joe and Anita presenting chapter 6 of Amoris Laetitia to look at some of the pastoral perspectives. Okay.
After a scriptural look at marriages and families in chapter 1, challenges of families in chapter 2, and vocation of marriage in chapter 3, and love in chapter 4 and 5, comes chapter 6, where the Pope looks at various perspectives, pastoral perspectives, that are aimed at forming families according to God's plan. Here the Pope stresses on the vital importance of the gospel of the family, that is the scriptural teaching of the family. And he understands the immense challenges faced by them economically, socially, culturally, politically, and so on. Chapter 6 starts with Pope Francis saying that enabling families to take up their roles as active agents of the family apostolic calls for an effort at evangelization and catechism within the family. In other words, he's saying that families must be formed before they can reach out to others. And pastoral care of the family needs to make it clear that the gospel of the family is to respond to the deepest expectation of the human person, to respond to the human person's dignity and fulfillment in the area of reciprocity, communion, and fruitfulness. The gospel of the family needs to be proclaimed and experienced as a joy that fills the hearts and minds, because in Christ you have been set free from sin, sorrow, loneliness, as quoted in Evangelii Gaudium by Pope Francis also. That he says that because marriage is a joy-filled domestic church by the grace of our sacrament of matrimony. If marriage is joy-filled, then what happened? Why did Evangelii Gaudium says that the church is a sign of contradiction? It is because of the many high ideals and expectations, besides many factors that marriages face in this world. So in order to enable families to take up their roles, they must be evangelized and catechized from within before they can evangelize others. Before the Pope goes into detail of how we do that to catechize families, he stresses that values, not just rules, must be inculcated for authentic family life. And we have to denounce cultural, social, political, and economical factors that prevent this authentic family life and leads to discrimination, poverty, exclusion, violence, and that is all this is happening in the world today. We need to dialogue, we need to cooperate, and need to encourage the lay people who are involved in these fields. In other words, I think advocacy is called for. And all these are we must have a missionary conversion in the whole church. Not as dramatic as Paul's conversion on the way to Damascus, but we truly need conversion. So Pope Francis has broken up this missionary conversion into 3 areas. The first is we need formation for the parish. Secondly, preparation for marriage, which take up nearly half the chapter of 6. And last but not least, pastoral care and pastoral accompaniment for the family. Now we start with number 1.
Why the parish? Because the parish is a family of families to start with. It's a communion of communities. It's an ecclesial movement. And within the parish, we have ministries, organizations, and many others that promote family life or to pastoral care of families in the parish. Firstly, we need to look at the training and the formation of lay leaders. If lay leaders are not trained, then how are they to lead? Especially all the pastoral workers. And this could be achieved through courses, enrichment programs, and all that leads to empower our lay leaders. Having done that for the lay leaders, we must now look at the formation for the laity. Similarly, through programs, talks, and these talks can be drawn from the professionals in our parish so that they can help in the integration into the broader dynamics of ecclesial life. And we also need continuous formation for our priests, especially in areas of family life. And what does the parish need? It even speaks of training and formation for seminarians to be more extensive and grounded for better self-esteem and a more mature and psychological balance for their future ministry. Once our seminarians comes into ordained as priests, they will have to deal directly with the people of the parish. And we need, all of us without exceptions, we need to draw treasures from the church, especially the sacraments and all the graces. For without all this, we are not empowered to do anything. All things must come from the grace of our Lord. And also need to have or to look more at the preparation for marriages, that it should be more intensive to prepare our couples for marriage.
Now, in Amoris Laetitia, Pope Francis divided this preparation for marriage actually into 2 areas. He called it long-term preparation and short-term preparation. But in Familiaris Consortio, Pope Francis Pope John Paul divided the long preparation under 2 titles: remote preparation and proximate preparation, and the short term as immediate. So I go with first. Remote preparation is from the day the child is born. They born with the mother and the rest of the family. They experience family love. That is remote preparation. What is love? What is family? What is marriage? Then secondly, is proximate preparation is from witnessing marriages around you, from from your parents, from friends, from relatives, from colleagues, how they celebrate their marriage, how they celebrate birthdays, and all this.
Festivities.
This will be preparing them in an approximate way for marriage. Last but not least is immediate preparation. And in the Archdiocese of Kuala Lumpur, we have this course called CMPC, Marriage Preparation Course, Catholic Marriage Preparation Course. And we have this already. That Pope Francis go further into a bit of detail. First, he said, we need to talk about communication of self, discovery of each other's strengths and weaknesses, and be open and honest to accept and change where you can. And where you cannot, you learn to accept. Then we need to communicate to them goals and dreams for their married life together. Then of feelings, difference between love and desire, love and lust, and so on. Then they must know each other's needs. Here we are talking about psychological needs. Everyone has different needs at different times of their life. We must find out what is our spouse need and of expectations also from each other. We must know what expectations will come that come into our marriage, that you don't have expectations of each other, but you have to share.
Next, we take a look at the marriage bond. Many of our young couples do not fully understand that marriage is a lifelong commitment and it is indissoluble. It's not something you do as a temporary measure. It's for life. And a love that is sustained and sanctified by grace. You cannot do it alone. Your love will never last if you think you can do it on your own. It needs to be sanctified and by grace. And to understand that marriage is a sign of the covenantal love and union between the incarnate Son of God and his church, and that in the conjugal pact or our sexual intimacy lies the mystery of that, and that has the origin in God himself. And you can see the full explanation in Amoris Laetitia, para 213. But in short, it's simply that we recall what God has done in his creation story in Genesis chapter 2. For that reason, a man leaves father and mother, clings on to the woman, and they become one flesh. The clinging together is a symbol of our sacramental sign, our conjugal union. That we are called forth to be faithful to the vows that we took at the sacrament of matrimony. Okay, so the two ender of this to be made known to our couples would be the sacrament of matrimony begins with the Bible, and the Bible ends with the marriage of the Lamb. So the life example given in Scripture is marriage in the beginning, Adam and Eve, marriage of Christ and the church towards the end of Revelation, so that there is a correlation between the marriage on earth and the marriage in heaven. And then to look at this sacrament of matrimony, first, it is not just a sacrament of the day, but a lifelong commitment. It is not a social contract. It is a covenant. That means one made should not be broken. So that we can understand the sacredness and the spirituality of the words of consent. When you ask certain questions before you are married in the church, question asked whether you are prepared to love freely, totally, faithfully, and fruitfully. In that context, in short, FTFF, implies that the procreative meaning of sexuality, the language of the body, the signs of love shown throughout the married life, all becomes an uninterrupted continuity of liturgical language. And our conjugal life or our sexual intimacy becomes, in a sense, also liturgical, especially when you come to the consent part, when you are asked, would you accept children that God gives you? Your answer is yes. And that yes can only come about in your conjugal pact. In other words, your marriage is consummated. And that's what makes it liturgical. In Amoris Laetitia, para 215.
Number 4.
And number 4, how do we overcome problems and difficulties that may encounter? That aspect is also covered in the marriage preparation course. And also to make couples understand that throughout your whole marital life, please seek recourse to the valuable sacraments of the church, especially in the Eucharist, in the services that the church can provide for you, and also for all the enrichment programs that empower you to love as Christ loved. And I think the Holy Father also wants to impress upon all of us the wedding liturgy to be simple and meaningful. Yeah. Because there are instances where marriage are between two parties where one is a Catholic, another one may not be so, or between Catholics and Protestants. So they have to understand that to make this liturgy to be as simple and meaningful. In fact, we also encourage our couples, especially between couples of disparity of worship, to involve the non-Christian also in the selection of the gospel reading, so that they have a part to share in it and they are not kept out of this aspect of their relationship, so that the wedding liturgy is also meaningful to them, even though they may not be Christians.
But fortunately, what Amoris Laetitia said about preparation of marriage, the Archdiocese of KL has already embarked on this for the last 40 years. And we have even more details than what Amoris Laetitia presents. We have more than that also. But one thing we don't have, which Pope Francis stressed on, very important, is accompaniment for the first year of the marriage, which we are started about 2 years ago only, when we started this young married couples ministry. Before that, we don't have this accompaniment. We have just started 2 years ago, but stopped by the pandemic. Now it's continuing again. Now, Pope Francis says that we must constantly remind these young couples, especially those in the first year of marriage, to rise above disappointments and to make decisions to love. In our course, we told them how to make decisions regardless of how you feel, and to encourage them to accept, to adopt responsible parenthood. In fact, couples have to go for a talk on this area, and to face realities with grace, harnessed from the sacraments. As Andrew said, you cannot do it alone. You need divine help, divine strength, divine grace. And also to tell them that you must hope for the future. How? By living in the now. Don't go and lament the past and live in the future. You hope for the future, you plan for the future, but you live in the now before the now goes into the past. and to readjust and to renegotiate constantly, especially during your life of a married life. Circumstances change. The children come, you have to adjust the time. Then when the pandemic comes, you have to adjust again to work from home. And all this, you have to renegotiate constantly for your marriage to work. Then we also should tell them to accept marriage as a process of growth, not a mountain of high expectations. We grow every moment. We should accept it as a joy to grow in love. And to accept each other as an unfinished product, a work in progress. I love this word in 221, And to help each other to be more of a man and more of a woman with the patience of a craftsman which only comes from God. So beautifully written by Pope Francis. And above all, when all things go out of control, Pope Francis says, pray for the grace of forgiveness and mercy. In fact, he has written a letter on this grace and mercy to families, for mercy and grace in families.
And to continue this accompaniment, pastors and parishioners, we really need to come together to help these young couples to grow in their faith, especially through the sacraments, the prayers, the celebrations, and scripture. And do not treat your Sunday obligations as something that you have to do, but to come because you love to worship your Lord. All the devotions that are available in the church, we encourage them at least to do the daily rosary or the divine mercies and stuff like that. Okay. So, and also our priests, as Pope Francis says, they can give spiritual directions and other spiritual formations, and can provide resources for couple growth in programs, talks, and retreats. And there are many programs available in our archdiocese to do just that. And where couples hit a raw part of their relationship, there is always available to them counseling and social services, all right, to help them cope with the situation. We need, like Holy Father also said, we should have more fellowships and home visits, especially community gatherings. This is where our BEC comes in to accompany our young married couples. And also, young married couples can get experienced couples to accompany them. And in certain churches, they are blessed with married deacons, and this become an asset to the church. And also to get parishes to be missionaries, to reach out to all, rather than to separate ourselves and forget that we belongs to each other, because why? We are the people of God. Okay, that's why we need to reach out.
Now, what about pastoral accompaniment for crises, worries, and difficulties? Pope Francis says that crisis is inevitable and should be accepted as a challenge of growth. Crisis need not cripple but strengthen us like matured wine. When crisis is not dealt with, couples grow apart and lose the ability to communicate. Crisis can be in the form of finance, work, emotion, social, or spiritual. There's a long chapter on that, too long to explain here. And to know how to forgive and to be forgiven is a basic experience of family life. We have to learn how to forgive. And a sincere self-examination is needed for reconciliation. Try to approach crisis with sensitivity, as most hurting couples, do not like to seek help. Fortunately, we have a new program called Rotoral in our archdiocese to help such couples in problem. Urgently needed is a ministry in the parish to help in these broken relationships.
Now, sometimes separation and divorce are inevitable. And the Holy Father said, even morally necessary in extreme cases of abuse and violence, where a partner is humiliated and exploited, disregarded, and indifference in their marriage relationship. And for the rest of us, those separated should be accepted fully to the sacrament of the church. Let us not point fingers. They need our understanding. And those who are divorced, especially civil divorce, not nullified, their marriage not nullified in our church. And if they are remarried, they are not excommunicated, please. They should be accepted as part of the church community, although they cannot take in the full sacrament of the church. In other words, those who are divorced and remarried without their marriage nullified by the church cannot receive the sacrament. That is all. In other aspect of church life, they should be welcome. Yeah.
We urge bishops.
And also, the Holy Father is saying is the authority of now to nullify a marriage or otherwise the whole procedure should be shortened and to make it more accessible and less time consuming, because this authority to do that now rests in the hands of our bishops and not have to send the whole paper to the Vatican. And here the family apostolate should be made available, counseling and meditation services for those affected families. And above all, in the provision of these services, calls for love and mercy, not judgment on our part. And you do also have some complex situations in marriages. Right now, you have mixed marriages between Catholics and other baptized Christians. In this context, of course, the Eucharist can only be received by the Catholic partner. Where you have disparity of cult marriage, means Catholics and those of other faith, or even for that matter, non-religious. Okay. The religious freedom of all must be respected. If you want to win anybody over to your side, I think it begins with understanding people of other faith. As St. Paul used to say, you go over to their side and slowly, lovingly bring them to our side, rather than to stand on our side and then to point fingers. It will not help, especially in this disparity in the cult marriages. And don't forget, 2/3 of the marriages today in our archdiocese consist of what we call marriage between disparity of worship. Next comes this very complex situation, single sex attraction or SSA. The Holy Father says this: sexual orientation of persons must be respected in his or her dignity without discrimination. And pastoral guidance have to be made available. What does the Holy Father talking about? You don't judge a person's sexual orientation. You can only judge what he does with his orientation. Because a homosexual union is in no way similar or even remotely resemble God's plan for marriage and family. It is in the action of people who have different sexual orientation. The action is the one that we can disagree, but not its orientation. Coming back to what the Holy Father has always been saying, God loved the sinners, not the sin. And I think we should apply this in the context of when we are dealing with people who are single sex attraction people, or homosexuals as you call it. But above all, it calls for love and understanding, love and mercy, not judgment. After all, Holy Father is saying the church is a field hospital.
Now, what about when death comes to the family? When death makes us feel its sting, how do we help? Amoris Laetitia says that grieving is a slow process. Questions will be asked. Why me? Although the certainty of death saddens us, we are consoled by the promise of immortality, that our loved ones are not lost in the shade of nothingness. Hope assures us that they are in the good hands of God. In the light of faith, it is our pastoral responsibility to support bereaved families with a sincere and patient process of prayer. Here we do the 7 days prayer, accompaniment, and interior liberation, which means that we try to help the person, let go of the past
And to move forward.
and to move forward. Love is stronger than death, Pope Francis said. Love enables us to hear words without sound and see the unseen, to live in the now and to continue to love in the future, and not to get stuck in the past. Interior liberation. Even Jesus asked Mary Magdalene not to hold on to him in order for her to experience a different kind of encounter. Then what about praying for the dead? To maintain a bond of love, reinforced by the exchange of spiritual gifts, where they in turn intercede for us in the communion of saints. We should prepare ourselves for death also by growing in love with those by our side. Last but not least, we have to move on. Let us not dwell on the distant past, but continue to live joyfully, to mature and develop in this world. Then, the more gifts will we be able to bring to the heavenly kingdom banquet. And that is the end of our presentation. But we would like, this is a picture of Father Kim's funeral. We would like to give a summary, a short summary of what we just talked about. The Pope started by saying that the gospel of the family must be proclaimed as a joyful domestic church by the grace of our sacrament. But the church is a sign of contradiction, as the family faces seemingly insurmountable challenges as shown in the world today. For the church to enable families to take up their roles, families must be formed and evangelized from within. Internal conversion before pastoral care is looked into, starting with a missionary conversion of everybody in the church by the formation of the whole parish, lay leaders, laity, seminarians, and even priests. A preparation for marriage, a stronger preparation for marriage to make the couples know the true meaning, the joy of marriage. And when things don't work out, pastoral care and pastoral accompaniment needed. First, for the first years of marriage, crisis in the family like difficult cases like divorce and separation, complex cases like remarried, LGBT, and bereavement and death. That's what we have been talking about for this half an hour. So we thank you for listening to us.